Welcome to the Cypress College Math Review for the Hotel, Restaurant, and Culinary Arts Department on fractions, decimals, percents, and averages. Objective 1. Convert between fractions and decimals. Fractions and decimals are just two different ways of writing the same numbers. When we see 0.7, most people do call it that, 0.7 or 0.7. But that's not technically correct. The correct way to say the number is 7/10. This is the tenths place, so 7/10. Now close your eyes. What do you picture when you say 7/10? Yeah, 7/10. That's what most people see, 7/10. So if you simply say a decimal number the technically correct way, then you can easily convert it to fractional form. I'm not suggesting that you should always read 0.7 as 7/10, just when you want to convert it to a decimal. 4.1. So that's 4 and 1/10. So as a fraction, 1/10. 4 and 1/10. This is the hundredths place, so this would be read the technically correct way as 36 hundredths. So as a fraction, that's 36 over 100. 36 hundredths. Yes, it still needs to be simplified, but at least we have it in fractional form. Now, to change fractions into decimals, the other way around, we divide the denominator into the numerator. Yes, the bottom into the top. To review, to change decimals into fractions, say it the technically correct way. And to change fractions into decimals, divide the bottom into the top. Example. Fill in the following chart converting between fraction and decimal numbers. 4/5. We divide 5 into 4. Now 5 does not go into 4, so we put the decimal point in both places and add a 0. 5 does go into 40 8 times. There's no remainder, so we're done. 4/5 is equal to 8/10, 0.8. So we've changed the fraction into a decimal. Now for 4 and 2/3. Our answer will be 4 point something, so it's the 2/3 that we have to change into a decimal. Let's divide 3 into 2. Now 3 does not go into 2, so we put down the decimal points and a 0. 3 goes into 20 6 times, and the remainder is 2. Tack on another 0. 3 goes into 20 6 times, leaving a remainder of 2. This process will continue forever. So we have 0.666, and let's just round that off to 2 decimal places. Let's call it 0.67. Therefore, 4 and 2/3 is equal to 4 and 67 hundredths, or more simply, 4.67. Now let's change 5.2 into a fraction. Oh, wait a minute, we said it wrong. Let's not say it that way. 5 and 2/10. Close your eyes. 2/10, that's 2 over 10. So we have 5 and 2/10. Now we need to reduce 2/10 to 1/5. So 5 and 2/10, or 5.2, is equal to 5 and 1/5. We changed this decimal number into a mixed number, but that is a fraction. Next one, 0.85. Don't say it that way. This is the hundredths place, so 85 hundredths. If you close your eyes, 85 hundredths, that's 85 over 100. Now let's reduce that. What goes into both? 5. 5 goes into 85 17 times, and 5 goes into 100 20 times. So this reduces to 17 over 20. So 85 hundredths, or 0.85, is equal to 17 twentieths.
Pause the video and try these problems.
Objective 2. Conversion between decimals or fractions and percents. The word percent means parts of 100. This means that percent can be considered to be a fraction with a denominator of 100. Example, write 53% as a fraction and as a decimal. 53% means 53 hundredths. Close your eyes again. 53 hundredths. You've already got it in a fractional form. 53 on top with 100 on the bottom. We have our fraction. Now let's change it into a decimal. Recall that when you divide by 10, you move the decimal place to the left once. If you divide by 100, you move the decimal place to the left twice. 53 divided by 100 then would be 0.53. Once again, if you say it correctly, you won't know whether you're referring to the fractional or the decimal form of the number. 53 hundredths. So 53% equals 53 hundredths, or as a decimal, 53 hundredths. When the denominator of a fraction is 100, it's pretty simple to change between the forms. So in the fraction, we have 3 hundredths. So 3 hundredths is 3 hundredths as a decimal. There we go, we're good. 0.03. As a percent, well, since percent means out of 100, 3 hundredths, that's 3%. Decimal, 0.67. So that's 67 hundredths. As a fraction, 67 hundredths. As a percent, 67%. All right, we got 49%. So percent means out of 100, so 49 hundredths. As a fraction, 49 over 100. As a decimal, 49 hundredths, or 0.49. 100%. So that's 100 over 100, which reduces to 1. So as either a fraction or a decimal, 100% is 1. We know that the following are equivalent, but how is it that we convert between fractions and decimals and percents? So 53% equals 53 hundredths as either a fraction or a decimal. 53 hundredths, so it looks like we need to divide by 100. So to change from a percent into either a fraction or a decimal, we divide by 100. And then we leave off the percent symbol. To change from a fraction or decimal into a percent, then we must do the opposite operation and multiply by 100. And then, of course, we write the percent symbol. So 53 hundredths times 100. Now write the percent symbol. This equals 53%. 53 hundredths times 100. Write the percent symbol. This equals 53%. Example, change 4.2 into a fraction and a percent. Well, first of all, let's say it correctly. 4 and 2 tenths. So 4 and then a fraction of 2 over 10. Now 2 tenths reduces to 1/5, so we have 4 and 1/5. There we go. We have it as a mixed number, and that's what we meant by changing it into a fraction. Now let's change it into a percent. So to change it to a percent, we need to multiply by 100 and write the percent symbol. Multiply by 100. What does that do? That moves the decimal 2 places to the right. So we have 420%. Example, change 1/3 into a decimal and a percent. Well, let's first change it into a decimal. So we need to divide the numerator by the denominator. So divide 1 by 3. So 3 doesn't go into 1, so we put down the decimal places. We put down the 0. 3 goes into 10 3 times. That's 9. Leaving 1 left over. We're going to get another repeating decimal. So we get 0.33333. Let's just round that to 0.33. We'll call that our decimal form. It's an approximation, but that's fine. Now for the percent. We could take the decimal form and multiply by 100, which means to move the decimal to the right 2 places. 33%. Now, since we rounded off, technically it should be 33 1/3%, but 33% is an acceptable approximation. Or we could take the fractional form 1/3 and multiply that by 100. So 100 over 3. Once again, we get approximately 33. So 33%, and it doesn't matter which way you do it. Change 0.7% into a decimal and a fraction. So this is a very small percent, less than 1%. We're going to change it first to a decimal. So to change it to a decimal, we need to divide by 100. So we're going to take the decimal point, which is right here, and we're going to move it left 2 places, and then we're going to drop the symbol. So 0.7% is the same thing as 0.007, or what place is that? The thousandths place, 7 thousandths. Now let's change it to a fraction. Divide 0.7 by 100. Oh, now we've got a decimal inside a fraction. Gross. So we need to clear that decimal place. So we're going to multiply it by the number 1, which looks like 10 over 10, because 10 times 0.7 is 7. There we go. So we cleared the decimal. What we do to the top, we have to do to the bottom. So now we multiply the bottom by 10, and we get 1,000, 7 thousandths. But you already knew that answer, didn't you? Because if you look at the decimal answer and you say it correctly, 7 thousandths, you're already there.
Pause the video and try these problems.
Objective 3, percent equation. 50 is 50% of 100. Let's translate this into an equation. Is a verb, so that's where the equals goes. Of in mathematics means multiply. So we have 50 is, which is equals, 50% of, which is multiply, 100. 50 equals 50% times 100. And recall that 50% is the same thing as 50 over 100, and 50 over 100 reduces to 1/2. So another way to think of this is 50 is 1/2 of 100. So to take 50% of something, that's the same thing as taking half of it. What is 25% of 400? So let's translate this into an equation. What? Well, we'll call that x. Is, well, that's equals 25% of, that's multiply, 400. So we have x equals 25% times 400. We could change 25% into a decimal and multiply 0.25 times 400. And if we had a calculator out, that's probably what I would do. But isn't there an easier way if we're doing it by hand? Well, 25% of something is the same as, well, as a fraction, 25% is 25 over 100, which reduces to 1/4. So 25% of something is the same thing as 1/4 of that thing. Think of money. A quarter, yeah? 25 cents. 25 cents is a quarter of a dollar, isn't it? So we could just take 1/4 of that thing, in other words, multiply it by 1/4. In general, use the form of the number, either fraction or decimal, that's easiest. So x equals 1/4 times 400. Let's do that. We can cancel the 4. 4 goes into 4 once. 4 goes into 400 100 times. So x equals 100. 100 is 25% of 400. Here are some common percentages that would be good to know as fractions. 10% is 1/10. 20% is 1/5. 25% is 1/4. 33 1/3%, or commonly rounded off to 33%, is 1/3. 50% is 1/2. 66 and 2/3, or commonly rounded off to just 67%, is 2/3. 75% is 3/4. And 100% is 1. When working with these percentages, it'd probably be easier to work with the fractional form of the number instead of the decimal form. Example, what's 33% of $6,000? Well, what, we'll call that x, is, that's equals, 33%, of is times, and then 6,000. So x equals 33% times 6,000. What form of the number is easier here, 1/3 or 0.33? Probably 1/3. So x equals 1/3 times 6,000. 3 goes into 3 once, 3 goes into 6,000 2,000 times. So 33% of $6,000 is $2,000. What's 21% of 400? Let's translate this into an equation. What, that's x, is equals 21% of times 400. X equals 21% times 400. For this problem, the decimal form, which is 21/100ths or 0.21, is the easiest to use. So we're going to multiply 400 times 0.21, and we get 84. So 21% of 400 is 84. Example, what is 75% of $400? What, that's x, is equals 75% of times 400. So x equals 75% times 400. Well, 75% of something is the same thing as 3/4 of that thing. So I think the fractional form would be easier to use here. X equals 3/4 times 400. We cancel a 4 out of the numerator and the denominator. So 4 goes into 4 once, 4 goes into 400 100 times. So now we have 3 times 100, which is 300. 75% of $400 is $300. Example, what is 142% of 5,000? So we have x equals 142% times 5,000. For this problem, the decimal form, which is 1.42, is the easiest to use. Recall that you divide by 100, which moves the decimal to the left 2 places. That's how I got 1.42. So we take 5,000 times 1.42. That gives us 7,100. So 142% of 5,000 is 7,100. Does that make sense? It's always a good idea to check to make sure that your answer is reasonable. 142%. Well, that's 100% plus 42%, isn't it? Well, 100% of 5,000 is, well, 5,000. 100% of anything is that same number. 42% of it, well, that's almost half of it. Yeah, that's almost 50% of it. Well, what's half of it? Half of 5,000 is 2,500. So 142% of 5,000 should be a little under 5,000 plus 2,500. Well, that's 7,500. Our answer is 7,100, a little under 7,500, so it makes sense. It's reasonable.
Stop the video for a little while and try these problems.
Objective 4, estimating percentages. It's often helpful to be able to estimate percentages. This is common when you're trying to figure out a tip or gratuity. Example, estimate a 15% gratuity for a bill of $31.70. First of all, it's a good idea to just round off your bill to make it easier to work with. Let's round $31.70 off to $32. 15%. Well, that's 10% plus 5%. So let's break it up that way. What's 10% of $32? Well, 10%, that's 1/10. So we're dividing $32 by 10. That moves the decimal one place to the left. So we get 3.2. So 10% of 32 is 3.2. 5% of 32, well, that's half of 10%, right? 5% is half of 10%. So what's half of 3.2? That's 1.6. So 15% would be 10% plus 5%. So we need to take the 3.2, which was 10% of it, plus the 1.6, which is 5% of it. 3.2 plus 1.6, that's 4.8. I left off the extra 0 just to make it easier to work with. So the tip should be around $4.80. Example, estimated 20% gratuity for a bill of $78.95. Well, let's round $78.95 off to $80. That makes it easier to work with. 20%, well, that's twice 10%, yes? So let's find out what 10% of it is, and then we'll double it. 10% of $80. Well, that's 1/10 of $80. Divide 80 by 10, and we get $8. So 10% of $80 is $8. 20% then would be twice that. What's twice $8? $16. So the tip should be around $16.
Pause the video and try these problems.
Objective 5. Find the average of a list of numbers. The average of a list of numbers is the sum of the numbers divided by how many numbers are in the list. Example, find the average of 4, 6, 7, and 9. There are 4 numbers here in our list. So we add up the numbers and divide by 4. 4 plus 6 is 10. 7 and 9 is 16. So we add those together. 10 and 16 is 26. So we have 26 divided by 4. 26 fourths. 26 and 4 are both divisible by 2. So 26 fourths reduced to 13 over 2. Now let's change this into a mixed number. 2 goes into 13 6 times, leaving a remainder of 1. So 13 over 2 equals 6.5. Therefore, the average of 4, 6, 7, and 9 is 6.5. Example, find the average of 2, 7, 11, 12, and 15. This time I have 5 numbers in my list. So we're going to add up the numbers and divide by 5. I'm going to show doing it by hand, but there's nothing wrong with doing this on a calculator. 2 and 7 is 9. 11 and 12 is 23. 9 and 23 is 32. Now we need to add the 15 in. So 32 and 15 is 47. So we have 47 divided by 5. Once again, doing this by hand, 5 goes into 47 9 times. 5 times 9 is 45. So the remainder is 2. 47 over 5 equals 9 2/5. So the average of 2, 7, 11, 12, and 15 is 9 2/5. If you did this on a calculator, you would get 9.4, and that's fine also.
Pause the video and try this problem.